I really wanted to like the Galaxy S26. I mean, Samsung has been the king of Android for years, but we gotta talk about this thing, because at this point, are they even being serious? Or are they just phoning it in? The look of smug Austin who thinks he had a funny joke and no one's laughing.
Was that on script?
We are 6 generations deep into the S20 era, and it's fine, you should probably get one. It's pretty much been the Galaxy S review for years now. Now I understand I sound like a jaded tech YouTuber, but I don't think that's the actual answer here. It's not like Samsung can't make exciting phones. I mean, I've been daily driving the Fold 7 since launch, and it is genuinely one of the best pieces of tech I've used in years. Samsung absolutely know how to make incredible hardware. So you gotta ask, what the hell happened with the S26? So just got my hands on the S26, the S26 Plus, as well as the S26 Ultra. And I think there are 2 major stories to tell. Now on the Ultra side, there's some good stuff here. So it is saying the same price, is using the brand new Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 for Galaxy, but importantly it actually has a really cool new feature, privacy screen. The way this works is when it's off, it just looks like a normal OLED. However, when you turn it on, it actually will selectively either block the entire screen or even something as simple as your notifications from someone who's looking at it from the side. Unless something like a film, which you can do this with, it will work depending on which app you're on. You can turn it on and off, and when it's off, you would never notice. It's really cool because they're literally turning on and off actual pixels on the display. A great example of Samsung display at work on a Samsung phone. However, I think the bigger story is with the base Galaxy S26 as well as the Plus. The S26 is a tough sell this year. It is first of all more expensive, so it is now going from $800 to $900. It has got some cuts, so it no longer has millimeter wave on the base model. And while in the US, all of the Galaxy S26 line are using Snapdragon processors, in other markets such as Europe as well as Korea, it is actually going to be using the Exynos 2600. And there are actually some, I don't call them downgrades, but for example, on the Ultra, it's no longer made out of titanium. So they've gone back to aluminum. Now, supposedly it's a little bit more of a armored aluminum, it's a higher grade, but I think it's a really interesting year to look at the Galaxy S26 line because there's some good, but there's also a lot of stuff which, I'll be honest, is a bit disappointing. Let's start with something that's hard for me to justify. If you pull up the camera specs on the Galaxy S23, S24, S25, and the brand new S26 side by side, you'll see they're the same. The base S26 is shipping with essentially the same camera system Samsung has been using since 2023, just with a little bit of sprinkled AI on top. Same main sensor, same ultra wide, same telephoto. We're talking about 4 generations, 4 years with these same cameras. In a world where the competition like the Pixel and the iPhone are constantly upping the game, is it really okay to have essentially the same camera setup year after year after year? I would argue, no, not even a little bit. Especially when you're charging $100 more. Look, I'm sure these cameras will be solid, maybe even good, but while the main sensor is all right, I would say that the ultra-wide and definitely the telephoto are really showing their age at this point. There's also still no Qi 2 magnetic charging. I mean, Apple's had MagSafe for years, and the Qi 2 standard exists specifically to bring that capability to everybody. Samsung is sitting this one out. I'm sure there's a perfectly good engineering reason for that, like interfering with reverse wireless charging or something, but all we know for sure is it definitely has nothing to do with the fact that they want to sell you a first-party case with the magnets already inside.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
And remember the Galaxy S25 Edge, Samsung's ultra-thin phone that they announced last year? I actually really liked it personally, but it seems to have sold poorly and there's no S26 Edge. Now compare that to foldables, where Samsung is on generation 7 of the Fold and they just dropped the brand new Trifold. I think this really shows where the priorities are inside Samsung. I think the story of the Galaxy S26 makes a lot more sense in the context of 2020. When Samsung launched the Galaxy S20, they made a big bet by pushing the base model up to a full $1,000. Now we're not talking about the Ultra. This was the base S20, and you know what happened? It didn't work. Samsung had to start discounting the S20 almost immediately after launch. So the following year with the S21, they basically admitted their mistake and cut the base price to $799, a full $200 less. And to hit that price point, they had to make some real cuts. The S21 went from glass to plastic on the back, and the display dropped from QHD to 1080p. Now the S20 was such a big step forward for the line. I mean, they brought 5G, 120Hz. This is the first time they did the Ultra phone, which actually has been really successful, but as always, they ran into one of the biggest problems you can run into as a smartphone manufacturer, Timmy Cook. He just said no, buy an iPhone instead. Here's the thing that most people don't think about. Apple's base iPhone and Samsung's base Galaxy S have been in this pricing dance for years. Samsung can't really charge significantly more than Apple for a standard smartphone because, well, why would you pay more for the Galaxy when you can get an iPhone and vice versa?
Samsung and Apple have pretty much always competed over the same customers, and now that the base S26 is more expensive than the base iPhone, you gotta imagine that is going to be a tough sell.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Apple has a massive advantage that Samsung just can't match. In the last quarter alone, Apple's services business, so we're talking about the App Store, iCloud, all the stuff you're probably spending money on by owning an iPhone, generated $30 billion in revenue. Now that's not accounting for the money they make on the actual hardware, which, surprise, surprise, the iPhone makes Apple a lot of money. What this means though is that Apple can afford to be more aggressive on pricing because every iPhone sold is basically a machine that prints money for years. Samsung just doesn't have anything close to that because it's Google who make the money from software such as the Play Store. I mean, Samsung, they just have to make their money from the hardware itself. And that's starting to get harder and harder. There's another half of the story as well. Samsung are kind of fighting with themselves. A few months ago, reports surfaced that allegedly Samsung's memory division was saying no to Samsung's own phone division. The phone team wanted to lock in a long-term deal for RAM. You know, the memory that goes inside every Galaxy phone that tends to be a little hard to come by these days. They just wanted to lock in a stable price for the next couple of years. Pretty standard request, but the memory division allegedly said no. Thanks to the massive AI data center build-out right now that's given us all the RAM crisis, supplies on all memory is tight. The price of mobile RAM has skyrocketed over the last year and shows no signs of slowing down. So Samsung's own memory division allegedly looked at that and said, yeah, we can make way more money selling to AI data centers than giving our own phone team a deal. I mean, just imagine that the Apple team said, hey, we don't want to sell our phone processors to the iPhone team, we'd rather sell them to NVIDIA to make more money. Like, what? Now, officially, Samsung have denied this story, but the math just doesn't lie. Reports show that Samsung's chip purchasing costs for smartphones jumped around 25% in a single year. And again, that was before the worst of it. When costs spike like this, something has to give. And I think the thing that gave this year is the Galaxy S26.
With the base Galaxy S26 this year, Samsung have been forced to cut costs, and they've also been forced to raise the price, which is a very, very tough situation to be in when your biggest competitor is the same capacity iPhone at $100 less. As the S20 showed us, that is usually a recipe for disaster, or for some quick carrier discounts.
Okay, so I realize I've spent a lot of this video being very critical, and I do want to pull back for a second just because I think a lot of this makes a lot more sense when you don't think about Samsung as a phone company. You think about them as what they really are, a massive tech conglomerate. They make the displays for a huge number of the world's smartphones, including the iPhone. They're one of 3 companies that make the vast majority of the world's memory chips. And of course, right now, that business is absolutely printing money for them thanks to AI. They run one of the only cutting-edge foundries on the planet to make CPUs, GPUs, and more. They make TVs, appliances, SSDs, you name it. The Galaxy S line used to be a huge moneymaker, but I think over the years, it's become less and less important to Samsung. And here's the thing, Samsung makes money whether you buy a Galaxy S26 or many of their competitors. So when you look at the S26 and ask, why isn't this more exciting? I think the honest answer is they've kind of moved on. And they've moved on to foldables. The Fold 7 was a complete redesign that I can argue with a completely straight face that it is the best single phone that exists today. I've also spent some time with Samsung's Trifold, and while the $2,900 price tag means it'll never be a big seller, it is an impressive first generation effort. And with Apple expected to enter the foldable market this year with the iPhone Fold, we're about to see Samsung defending a category that they've pretty much built from scratch against their biggest rival. And what do the rumors about the iPhone Fold point to? A screen from Samsung Display! No matter where you look, Samsung wins. This is where the energy is going, and this is the fight that they care about. I did the power thumb. This is what they care about. Profits and shareholders! A little corruption, but you know, just a little corruption never hurt anybody, right? No, actually, no, maybe there's some evidence against that.
I think you can sum up the Galaxy S26 this year in 2 stories. The Ultra is that legitimate upgrade. While I don't love the way it feels in the hand, it's much more rounded, it feels a little bit more generic compared to the monolithic slab that the S25 Ultra and previous models were, but you're getting that privacy screen, which is absolutely fantastic. Like, I cannot underestimate it enough. It is the main feature this year. Unfortunately, it's only on the Ultra, but this is what's gonna be in all the marketing. This is kind of why you buy an Ultra. Other than that, you have the new Snapdragon processor, which is a bit faster. The cameras do have a wider aperture on the main sensor as well as telephoto, but for the most part, besides stuff like having charging speed improved, it's a moderate upgrade, right? But the S26, I would say, is neutral to almost a downgrade. I mean, you're talking about a phone that is $100 more expensive, and for that, you do at least get 256 gigs of storage standard. Like, that's important. But other than that, you've got the same camera hardware since the S23 and S24 and S25. You've got yourself the same charging speed. You've got yourself a lack of millimeter waves to actually remove that on the S26 to save money. And it's just a tough sell, especially considering the fact that while in the US it does have the Snapdragon chip, in much of the rest of the world it's using an Exynos chip, which we'll see how it actually comes out, but is likely not going to be as good. And it just kind of tells the story that while I completely understand 2026 is a difficult year to launch tech in, the S26 base model isn't really an upgrade. I would say it just kind of isn't. Like, there's no other way of putting it.
The story with the Galaxy S26 isn't about winning or losing. It's about the idea that Samsung need a phone at every price point in every carrier store to maximize profits. But I gotta ask, is just existing good enough? At this point, I kinda don't think so. And that, my friends, is the real question. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Am I absolutely wild and off base with this take, or is there something to it? And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring-a-ling that ding-ling button for more flippy, foldy, and non-foldy content coming your way soon. Mostly foldy though, because this is clearly better.